Hello and welcome to another episode of Sociology School. In this episode I'm going to be talking about the two different types of 10 markers that you can get given in A-Level Sociology. So those students who have been in Year 12, you have not been introduced yet to the second type of 10 marker. But I hope that this video is going to explain the difference between the two. One is very straightforward, the other is not. So it's definitely worth taking a watch of this even if you haven't started your A-Level content yet, because it's going to give you a little bit of an indication of what you're looking for. Just a reminder, the normal paragraph structure that I use in sociology is PESH. That does not change. Even though you've got some different types of questions appearing in A-Level, we still use this structure because it allows students to demonstrate all of the 3 assessment objectives in one paragraph. Speaking of assessment objectives, you get AO1 marks for showing key terms, concepts, points, sociologist names. AO2 comes from linking things to the item, as well as sociological evidence, contemporary examples, links to topics in sociology. And then analysis and evaluation is often shown through strengths and weaknesses, counter-argument, alternative explanations, and giving that detail and discussing the impact of things, which, as you can see here, the assessment objectives are deliberately made to link up to the different aspects of the paragraph structure. Now, there are 2 types of 10 markers that you can receive in an A-Level sociology paper. You can receive an outline and explain 2 question, which is very similar to what you've been expected to do at AS. So outline and explain 2 reasons, 2 criticisms, 2 effects, 2 aspects. It's basically the same thing. The example question that's been given here is an example from the theory and method section, which if you are in Year 12 you will not have done yet. Outline and explain 2 problems of using the functionalist perspective to study today's society. So you have basically 2 paragraphs to write there. And then you've got the second type, which is a lot more difficult. Apply material from item A, analyse 2 ways in which the education system might serve the needs of capitalism. So you can see your command word there is analyse, and that means your points have to come from the item and they can't come from your own knowledge. So this first type of question is easy peasy lemon squeezy, but this second question isn't particularly nice. Difficult, lemon, difficult. And as an examiner, these questions are often the most difficult questions to mark as well, because you need to be trying to explicitly show how you've got your points from the item. Just so you're aware, in terms of the amount of marks that are available in an outline and explain question, you've got 5 marks for AO1. So that question is really about showing off your knowledge and giving lots of detail and explanation. Not many marks for AO2 and not many marks for AO3. So really there, your points you need to be focusing on are getting the P and the E in a lot of detail, as well as, aspects of the S that's important there in the paragraph. But here you can see there are loads of marks for AO2. Now AO2 partly comes from the use of the item. AO2 can also come from application of key terms and key researchers as well. But the focus really is on AO2 there in comparison. So you do need to make sure that you are using that as part of your question. You can see in these essays as well, unlike the longer answers, which another video does explain, AO3 has less of a focus. So on these short questions, it's really about showing knowledge and understanding and explanation and application. The opportunity to show evaluation, which is the high-level skill, comes in the longer answer essays. But that's not to say that it's not important here, and I'm going to talk about how you use each of those assessment objectives now. So if we take this question here, outline and explain, the structure goes as follows. So you have one PES paragraph followed by another PES paragraph. You don't need an introduction, you don't need a conclusion, it doesn't ask for it, the mark scheme doesn't require it, but what it does do is require 2 very good developed paragraphs. Now, as the command words are outlined and explained, you do not need to evaluate. Your AO3 marks come from your explanation as opposed to your evaluation. Some students do put however points in there almost as a creature of habit. They've got used to providing evaluation, and sometimes it can extend your knowledge, but you just have to be careful about how you use it if you do use it. I don't mind you using it, but you won't necessarily get any additional marks for doing so, but it might just show off your writing technique. So in this question, outline and explain 2 problems of using the functionalist perspective to study today's society. There are a wealth of things you could talk about here. Functionalist perspective is one of the easiest to critique because it's quite a nice 10-mark theory methods question that you'd see at the end of the education paper. But you make your you get your marks really from A01. So it's really important that you're showing off the knowledge that you've got of the functionalist perspective in this answer, which can be done through using key terms, through using specific sociologists and research. But it is really, really important that you are developing your points. So here's just an example of some sentence starters. So one problem is that the functionalist perspective is outdated, and you can go on to talk about how society's changed quite a lot since writers like Durkheim and Parsons were writing. Then you can go on to talk about potentially a link to the nuclear family. So your A02 marks come from making links to other aspects of the specification. That would lead you quite nicely to talk about Murdoch and Parsons, who are functionalists, and talk about what the problems of their analysis of society. And then your so what point can come from talking about how, it's a problematic idea that the functional perspective is outdated, because in our postmodern society we're not as reliant on those kind of concepts like the nuclear family that the functionalists say. Or potentially you could talk about how the organic analogy is irrelevant and institutions aren't working effectively together, which could be an example of what's going on here. Then I might go for our second point that it ignores the micro perspective. It ignores that view of the actor, the individual, which an interactionist perspective would do much better. So it fails to consider the importance of small-scale interactions because it only focuses on the wider structure of society. And then you go on to talk about how that's a problem because it only considers structural factors. So it's very basic here, but you do need to really, really, really elaborate. Just to reiterate, you don't need a however point in a question like this. The examiners are not really looking for it, so you don't need to provide evaluation, particularly as there's no hint that you're being asked to evaluate in the command words in the question, but sometimes you might decide to do so if you think it's going to help you to make your point further. But remember, if the question's asking for 2 problems and then you end up developing 2 strengths, then that kind of means that you haven't fully read the question. So do use a however point with caution in these questions. Only use it to make your points more effective. But I really want to emphasise this. You can see under each of the letters I put at least 3 sentences, 3 example ways that you could elaborate. And often what I get is just 3 sentences. It's not enough. It's a detailed paragraph. This essay should be taking you 15 minutes, which means each paragraph should be taking you 7 minutes to write. If a little bit more. You should not be just writing 3 sentences and going bish bash bosh done. That's not what this is about, so do be really, really careful. You need to be elaborating, particularly here and particularly here, which allows you to get those marks that are available. But on the whole, that question is pretty easy. The paragraph structure that you've been used to and you've got really good at, so those questions shouldn't frighten you in any way. These questions are more challenging, and students historically don't do as well on this type of question. Now, it follows the paragraph structure of pesh then pesh, as you would expect. Nothing unusual here, apart from the command word analyse too. So if we look at this question here, apply material from item A, analyse 2 ways in which the education system might serve the needs of capitalism, and then you've been given an item. It says apply material from item A, but it does not say and your own knowledge, which we see in the higher mark questions. So it wants your points to both come from the item, and that's the tricky thing. And through analysis, you're explaining what the item's telling you in more depth, and you have to link your knowledge to the item. So it's less free, it's much more difficult, and often the items are worded in a way which makes it relatively hard to extract what the examiner is trying to look for. What I would obviously do first of all is look through the item and try and identify quotes and keywords that I think are relevant, and therefore I think I can use them. So the quotes that I think are relevant for this is the bit where it's talking about new generation of workers, alienating, capitalism being unstable, depends on the proletariat not seeking to overthrow this unequal system. And then, once I've got some quotes, I need to think about, okay, so I know this question's on the education system and Marxism, because it's talking about capitalism, Marx is in the item, so I know I need to think about who are my marks as sociologists, and from there, once you've got that down, it's pretty straightforward of how you'd answer this question. It does take a while to pick out the bits that are relevant, so I'd start off with that quote. I repeat the words of the question to help my point make sense. I then pick out the idea that it depends on the proletariat not seeking to overthrow this unequal system. Then I might go on and talk about the ideological state apparatus and the work by Althusser. I then go on to talk about what that means. So how does it meet the needs of capitalism? Well, if students are brainwashed through the ideological state apparatus to accept capitalism, then therefore it supports capitalism and it makes people continue to buy into that ideological mindset. But then I'd criticise it, because you can also get AO3 marks here from developing an evaluation point. So, it assumes that individuals are passive and that we can't see that we're being brainwashed, for example. And then my second point would come from the quote that's actually above that. I just felt that the second point actually allowed you to make the point clearer. But each new generation of workers forced to undertake low-paid, alienating work. That part of alienating work I kind of linked to the hidden curriculum. So I've gone to talk about the correspondence principle from Bowles and Gintis and how it encourages you to accept the way of work, so that when you get into those low paid positions you don't challenge it. So you accept hierarchy, you accept mundane tasks, you accept time management, etc. So by the time you get into work, you're used to being in that position. It means that you learn to accept those things, and therefore that supports the needs of capitalism, because you can continue to be exploited because you're kind of used to it and you don't challenge it, and therefore you're not going to overthrow that system, as the other quote kind of hints to. However, there are some positives of the hidden curriculum. You can talk about, that it makes people responsible and they contribute to society, things like that. So this question is much more difficult, and here's just a few kind of bits of advice to help you answer this question. So each part of the PES should be more than one sentence long. They should really be developed. They shouldn't just be, again, you've got 7 or 8 minutes to write each paragraph. So they need to be detailed. They need to be more than just one sentence long. You need to assume that the examiner is stupid and really explain each point you're making. Your points have to come from the item. They have to. You need to quote the item as much as you can in your answer to show that you've used it. The so what point is really important, because that's what links it and makes it clear that you've answered the question. So really, really do develop that point. And then your H points can gain you further marks for AO3. It's a difficult question. I think what's important to note is that these questions are marked holistically. So whilst, yes, I'm saying there are 3 marks available for AO1, 4 for AO2 and 2 for AO3, really, you can, if you've written a really good answer, they can kind of shift those around a little bit. So if you want to pause the video, have a go at answering these 2 questions, which come from the 2017 paper 1. And this will allow you to practice those structures that I've outlined. So just pause the video and have a go. Alright then, so I hope you found that useful. If you've got any more questions about those 10 mark questions, do let me know. It might be useful for you to have a go at writing those 2 answers that I've planned out as well, to help get those structures in your head. Don't feel overwhelmed. If you do have any questions, let me know, and if you've got any other requests of videos that you'd like to have to help you, let me know. Bye.